Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Riffel, and I am a student here at CW in the Masters of Literary and Teaching program. And I apologize that my thing says that I should be there in person for an oral presentation, but unfortunately there was a mix-up on my part. So today I'm going to talk about literary networks, and the title of my presentation in my paper is Literary Networks Everywhere, an analysis of literary connections across primarily postmodern poetry, but also across time and culture. So in today's postmodern world, we hear many questions that spark controversy, such as, why do we keep reading old dead white guys? As a high school English teacher, I get this question a lot. And I think that it also happens in higher education as well. And then, especially in higher education, we ask ourselves, like, what is the worth of the canon? If it is primarily filled with voices who are singular voices and not diverse, then is it worth maintaining? While these are excellent reflective questions that keep us responsible and inclusive, I'd like to present the merit in keeping our canon and old dead white guys because they are the central nodes to endless networks of literature and culture, especially for us Westerners. Famous author Michael Chabon once commented that all literature is essentially fan fiction, meaning that every author is inspired by or uses pieces of another author's work to create their own. For example, Chabon talks about how Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock character inspired many of his own writings, and his writings have then inspired others to write as well. And so the legacy of Doyle and Sherlock live on. So let's talk about the basics of what it means to have a network as form. So my thesis is essentially that literary networks connect writers across time, culture, and genres, including in this current postmodern world that we live in. And then I'll be applying Caroline Levine's theory of network as form. One of the most infectious networks in literature is literature itself, and writers and creators reference each other's works to give credence to what inspired their own and to maintain a literary colloquium within the community. So why do networks matter? Well, three primary reasons that they matter are because they break down hierarchies, they allow cross-cultural and historical dialogue, and then they enable writers to expand meaning and influence. This idea. So one such is the one node that we can see throughout Western literature from the Renaissance onward is the sonnet. So the sonnet is probably one of our most traditional forms of poetry, and two of the poets I'll focus on today, Terrance Hayes and Carl Phillips, both write sonnets and also comment on this form. And this connects them to two of the most influential sonnet writers in history, Marlowe and Shakespeare. So Terrance Hayes and the sonnet tradition, within his book, American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin, Hayes reclaims traditional sonnet form to challenge its hierarchy, and he redefines and adds a node to the definition of what it means to be a sonnet. Sonnets are very, as all of us know, they're very strict in their tradition and form. And Hayes, while he does use a structure of 14 lines for each of his sonnets, does not use rhyme scheme or consistent meter, and thus redefines what it means to have or to write a sonnet. And then he also uses allusions to Emily Dickinson, Greek mythology, including Orpheus, and then St. Francis and Galway Kinnell, which also create even more networks within, or even more nodes that connect to a larger network within his sonnets. So Terrance Hayes also connects topics that might not be predictable, I suppose. So Hayes' combination of topics creates an unforeseen network of literary references with sexual pleasure. For example, in one of his sonnets, he implies that Emily Dickinson's religious devotion connects to her sexual attraction to death. And for those of us who have read Shakespeare or Marlowe, while there is a connection to a lover most of the time in a sonnet or some sort of idealization, usually we're not, the topic is not really about a sexual attraction to death. Which expands that network of sonnet. He also writes, everything we do is at some level research for the next poem. So every experience that we have, every connection that we make is just a node for a possible connection to something that we create. And Carson's The Beauty of a Husband is a book in which she uses literary allusions to create nodes linking personal sorrow to historical or cultural sorrow. So the main character goes through a divorce or a separation from her husband, and she links those experiences to that of Keats and Milton and Homer, connecting her present day or modern sorrow or modern jealousies with that of the ancients. And she specifically uses Keats's The Jealousies, Homer's Iliad. And she also connects to historical figures such as Napoleon and others. So she also uses references like Eve Klein's Buddhism, and Emerson. And the key idea is that Nelson combines low and high culture into a seamless work of connected references. So my conclusion is that through Western literature, we observe the intertextual exchanges of references and new connections being made to create a broader network. This broader network encompasses a more holistic view of what life is like for humanity. Whether the nodes connect to minorities, marginalized sexual orientations, or even hierarchies themselves, over time they depict the same human experiences. And we consistently see cultural, historical, and thematic markers used as nodes within the network of the whole. These nodes can also be subjective points of reference that can vary from reader to reader. So in essence, the network never really has a stopping point, leaving room for unlimited expansion. So my argument overall is that when we make our literary inside jokes, or we name drop these old dead white guys, this is actually a really positive thing, and it creates markers for future generations and connections between the old and the new that will stand the test of time. Thank you for listening to my presentation.